Millionaire makes the last wish of a poor girl who has just a few days to live. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. The fluorescent light in the cold room reflected off the peeling white walls of the public hospital. The smell of disinfectant hung thick in the air, intensifying the discomfort. Emily Thompson sat on an uncomfortable metal chair, her trembling hands gripping tightly onto the worn strap of her handbag. The room seemed to close in around her as she stared at the doctor in front of her. The man in the white coat had a grave expression. His tired eyes, likely from too many night shifts, were fixed on her. He sighed, as though searching for gentler words, but he knew there was no way to soften the blow he was about to deliver. "I'm sorry, Emily. You're very ill and have only a few months left to live. I suggest you make the most of every moment because your time here will be short." The words cut through the air like knives. For a moment, Emily couldn't process what she had just heard. A numbness overtook her body. She felt her heart racing in her chest, the blood pounding in her temples. "What do you mean, doctor? I'm going to die," she stammered, her voice trembling and barely audible. The doctor hesitated for a moment but kept his gaze steady. "Unfortunately, yes, there's nothing more we can do. I know this is difficult to hear, but if you have any dreams, anything you've always wanted to do, don't put it off. Do it now." Emily froze. The world seemed to spin around her. The distant sounds of footsteps in the hallways, voices, and machines became muffled as if they were coming from another dimension. Her legs felt heavy, as if they were anchored to the floor. A growing mixture of disbelief and panic surged inside her. This can't be happening to me." Unable to say anything more, she mechanically picked up the documents from the desk, her trembling fingers barely able to hold the papers. She stood slowly, as though in a trance. Her eyes burned, but she fought to keep the tears at bay. With unsteady steps, she walked out of the room, leaving the doctor behind with a look of sorrow on his face. The hallway seemed endless. The cold lights continued to illuminate her path, but nothing appeared clear to her. People passed by, nurses, patients, visitors, but they were all a blur. When she finally reached the hospital's main entrance, the late afternoon chill hit her like a slap. The tears, at last, began to stream down her face. She moved away from the hospital, her steps quick and uncoordinated, her hands pressed against her chest. Her heart ached, and it wasn't just because of the diagnosis. It was a deeper pain, the brutal awareness that her life was nearing its end without her ever truly having lived it. The cold wind cut through her skin, but she barely noticed it. The city streets were nothing more than an empty backdrop in her troubled mind. Emily had no idea where she was going. She just walked, lost, with fear and anguish crushing her chest. Why was this happening? Why to her, of all people? She passed shop windows, parked cars, hurried people who paid her no attention. Everything seemed so distant, so irrelevant now. I didn't have time for anything, she thought as the tears continued to fall. The sense of helplessness grew with each step until her eyes caught sight of a church building. The colorful stained glass windows reflected the golden light of the setting sun, giving the place a warm, welcoming glow. Emily stopped, hesitating, her legs trembling. For some inexplicable reason, she decided to go inside. Maybe she was searching for answers. Maybe she just wanted to escape her own thoughts. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open. Inside, the silence was profound. Wooden pews stood in neat rows, leading to an altar bathed in sunlight. Emily walked slowly toward the back of the church and sat on one of the last pews. Her chest rose and fell with quick breaths. She fixed her gaze on the altar, where the light filtered through the stained glass, softly coloring the space around her. The pain and despair that had been building inside her burst forth. In an uncontrollable impulse, she screamed, her voice echoing through the empty sanctuary. "Why me? Why, Lord? I had so many dreams. I won't get to marry, to be a mother. Why? The cry reverberated off the walls, fading slowly into the air. Tears streamed freely down her face. She lowered her head, covering her face with her hands, lost in anguish and confusion. Time seemed to stand still in that moment. Emily was drowning in her thoughts when she felt a gentle hand rest on her shoulder. Startled, she lifted her tear-streaked, red eyes. Standing before her was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a kind expression. He wore simple clothes, but his presence radiated calm and comfort. It was Pastor Samuel Harris. "Are you all right, my dear?" he asked softly, his voice gentle, as if afraid of startling her further. Emily tried to respond, but the words caught in her throat. The weight of her emotions made her crumble completely. Another wave of tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. No, I'm not all right." She took a deep breath, struggling to regain some composure. "I've lost my chance to live. Now I have only a few months left. And I don't understand why God did this to me." Her voice came out broken, laden with anguish. The pastor furrowed his brow slightly, not in judgment, but in empathy. He sat beside her on the pew, keeping his hand on her shoulder, now offering silent support. "I'm so sorry that you're going through this." He paused, allowing the weight of her words to linger in the stillness of the church. "But this life you have you truly lived it?" Emily looked up, surprised by the question. Her expression reflected her confusion, as if the question had no relevance to what she was experiencing. "What do you mean?" she asked, her brow furrowing in bewilderment. The pastor's gaze remained calm and compassionate. He knew that what he was about to say needed to be delivered with care. "Have you enjoyed your life? Experienced good moments? Felt happiness? Had fun? Can you be proud of the life you've lived so far?" The questions hit her like an avalanche. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She felt a different kind of pain, something deeper than the fear of death. It was the weight of truth. After a few moments, she lowered her head, staring at her clasped hands resting on her lap. "No, haven't." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I'm poor. I spent my whole life trying to save, trying to survive. I work more than I sleep. I don't go out with anyone. I don't even see my family very often. I haven't been living. I've just survived." Hearing this, the pastor nodded slightly, as if he had already anticipated her response. He understood what it meant to live a life devoid of purpose and meaningful moments. Many people who sought comfort in the church carried that same silent pain. Perhaps God is giving you an opportunity to change that. Emily raised her eyes again, puzzled. Those words sounded unexpected. "An opportunity?" she repeated, unsure of his meaning. The pastor smiled gently, trying to convey hope through his gaze. "Yes, everyone needs good moments, Emily. Everyone needs to stop, breathe, and take care of themselves. Maybe you got sick because you forgot that. You forgot to live. You didn't have fun, you didn't rest, and you didn't take the time to look around and feel what it's like to be happy. Rest is necessary. Taking care of yourself is just as important as working and saving." He paused briefly, letting his words sink in. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but warm. "So now stop and think. What have you always wanted to do? What dreams have you postponed? What has your heart always desired but you never had the time or courage to pursue?" Emily felt as if an invisible door had opened before her. His words echoed in her mind. Dreams, desires. She couldn't even remember the last time she had truly wanted something for herself. Everything had always seemed so distant, so out of reach. But now there seemed to be a glimmer of hope, a chance to start over even with limited time. The pastor looked at her with gentle eyes. "Make every second count, Emily. Make it worthwhile. I'll be here, praying for you." Emily's tears, once heavy with despair, now felt lighter, as if they were washing away some of her pain. She nodded slowly, wiping her face with her hands. "Thank you," she murmured, still emotional. The pastor stood up softly and left her alone to reflect for a few more minutes. Emily felt a new kind of strength growing inside her. This wasn't the end. Whether she had only a few months or not, she needed to live fully from that moment on. She needed to feel life, not just endure it. Taking a deep breath, she rose from the pew and gazed one last time at the illuminated altar. With steadier steps, she left the church, ready to rewrite the remainder of her story. The city streets were bustling, but Emily Thompson walked slowly, experiencing the world differently. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cold afternoon air. Closing her eyes for a moment, she let the oxygen flow through her body, an almost invigorating sensation. As she exhaled slowly, she realized she felt lighter, as if each step she took reaffirmed that her life still had meaning. Her feet led her to a quiet park in the city center. Emily found an empty bench near a lake and sat down. The gentle sound of water trickling from a nearby fountain soothed her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to pause and simply think about herself, about her forgotten desires. "What have I always wanted to do?" she murmured, her eyes fixed on the scenery before her. Memories began to surface in her mind. Ever since she was young, she had watched cooking shows hosted by a famous chef, William Monroe. She had been fascinated by his elegant creations and the passion he poured into every dish. Emily had dreamed of one day visiting the resort where he worked, a breathtaking place in the mountains, where guests could ski, play golf, and savor exquisite gourmet meals. She had never had the time or money to fulfill that dream. There were always bills to pay, responsibilities to meet. But now, what was stopping her? Nothing. She had savings. What was the point of holding onto them if the future she feared no longer existed? A faint smile formed on Emily's lips as a firm decision took hold of her. "It's decided. I'll book it for tomorrow. I'll use my savings and finally relax." Determined, she got up and walked briskly back home. Once there, she packed her bags with her heart racing, a mixture of anxiety and excitement surging through her. She barely slept that night, but by the next day, she was ready and eager as she stepped for the first time into the luxurious Everglades Summit Resort in the Rocky Mountains. The resort was even more breathtaking than she had imagined. The elegant building, with its large windows reflecting the clear blue sky, was surrounded by snow-covered peaks. Emily paused for a moment at the entrance, awestruck. Inside, the lobby was grand, adorned with crystal chandeliers and warm, crackling fireplaces that filled the space with a comforting glow. She took in every detail: the refined decor, the gentle notes of instrumental music playing softly in the background, the scent of burning wood and spices. For the first time in her life, Emily felt she was in a place where she could allow herself to be cared for, where all her senses could be indulged. Later that evening, after a hot bath and a brief walk through the snow-covered gardens, it was time for dinner. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant dress. Descending to the main restaurant, she admired the golden chandeliers casting their light over crystal glasses and gleaming silverware. A courteous waiter guided her to her table. "Good evening, ma'am. Here is tonight's menu," he said, handing her a beautifully crafted menu. Emily took it and read attentively. There were so many options, each one more mouth-watering than the last. She smiled, remembering how long she had dreamed of this moment. "Well, I'll try this one today, and tomorrow I'll have that other one," she said with a grin. The waiter, a tall and polite man, gave a slight smile and explained, "Unfortunately, ma'am, the menu changes daily. It doesn't repeat during the month. Tomorrow will feature a completely new selection." Emily's eyes widened in surprise and delight. "Then, I want everything. I want to taste a bit of each dish. I can't miss this opportunity. Could you ask the chef to prepare smaller portions? I'd like to try the full menu, The waiter hesitated, unsure if she was joking or serious. "Are you serious?" he asked, still visibly confused. Emily let out a joyful laugh, something rare in her life but now flowing naturally. "Yes, I can't leave this world without tasting all the dishes from this amazing chef." "Very well, ma'am. I'll relay your request," the waiter replied with a nod. He walked back to the kitchen, shaking his head in disbelief but smiling nonetheless. Once inside the preparation area, he shared the unusual request with Chef William Monroe. The chef, a charismatic man in his mid-40s, was intrigued. He rarely had the opportunity to meet someone so enthusiastic about his work. With a satisfied grin, he began arranging the dishes. He paid close attention to every detail, preparing smaller portions so Emily could taste the entire menu. In the end, he decided to personally deliver the plates to her. When William appeared before her, pushing a cart full of culinary delights, Emily froze in shock. Her eyes widened in disbelief. I can't believe it. You're Chef William Monroe." In the flesh, he responded with a warm smile. "And you're the first person to ever request the entire menu all at once. I was intrigued and decided to come meet you myself." Emily quickly stood up, her heart racing. "Oh my God, I'm a huge fan. I've been watching your shows for years. You're incredible." Before she could stop herself, she embraced him, overcome with emotion. William chuckled good-naturedly. "It's a pleasure to meet you too. Shall we sit down? I'd love to hear what you think of the dishes." Emily nodded eagerly and took a seat beside him. The dinner that followed was nothing short of magical. The two of them laughed, talked, and sampled each dish together. Emily marveled at every new burst of flavor, sharing her impressions with infectious enthusiasm. Around them, other guests observed the scene with curiosity. "Who is that woman?" they whispered to one another. "We've never seen her here before." But Emily didn't care. For the first time, she was fully living without worrying about the judgment of others. By the end of the night, after taking a final sip of wine, she looked at the chef with a smile full of gratitude. "Thank you for this wonderful experience. I'll never forget this night." William smiled, raising his glass in a silent toast. As she remained seated, Emily reflected on her conversation with Pastor Samuel. He had been right. Enjoying life was essential. She finally understood the importance of surrendering to moments of happiness. In a discreet corner of the restaurant, Ethan Parker observed silently. Sitting alone at a table near the window, he had been watching the scene unfold with curiosity. The young woman, so full of enthusiasm, seemed like a beacon of light in the sophisticated and reserved atmosphere. While many guests kept their conversations quiet and formal, she stood out with her spontaneity. Ethan couldn't help but notice the sparkle in her eyes as she savored each dish. She wasn't just tasting the food, she was living the moment. Her radiant smile lit up her face, and her laughter, light and melodic, touched him in a way he hadn't expected. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen someone express such pure joy over something so simple. A successful businessman who had amassed a fortune, Ethan was no stranger to luxurious settings like this one. Yet, despite the opulence around him, those spaces often felt devoid of authenticity. The joy radiating from this woman intrigued him. Who was she? What was her story? From his seat, Ethan continued to observe as she lifted a glass of wine and made a small, silent toast to herself. Then, with grace, she stood up and began to walk toward the restaurant's balcony, which offered a breathtaking view of the moonlit mountains. He hesitated for a moment, but something compelled him to follow her. With his own glass of wine in hand, he walked toward the balcony. The cold mountain air enveloped him as he stepped through the glass door. Emily stood with her back to him, leaning on the railing, gazing out at the horizon. She took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill her lungs before releasing a long sigh, as if that moment were a form of renewal. Ethan stopped a few steps behind her, overhearing her softly murmur to herself, "Tomorrow's the day I learn to ski." He smiled at her words and, in a friendly tone, said, "I can help you with that." Emily startled slightly and turned around quickly. The tall, elegant man, dressed in a dark suit, stood there with a subtle smile on his face. She blinked a few times, trying to make sense of who this stranger was. "And who might you be?" "A ski instructor," she asked, her voice playful but tinged with suspicion. Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, not exactly," he replied, amused by her reaction. "No, but I'm a pretty good skier. I've had a few lessons. I can help you if you want," Ethan said with a friendly grin. Emily narrowed her eyes, as if trying to assess his sincerity. Then she turned her face toward the starry sky, letting out a sigh of disbelief. In her thoughts, she spoke to the universe. "You've got to be kidding me, right?" But at the same time, she reflected. What did she have to lose? Wasn't this exactly what Pastor Samuel had told her? To seize every opportunity, to say yes to life? She turned back to Ethan, now with a faint smile on her lips. "All right, I accept. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. in the hotel lobby." Ethan's smile widened. He raised his glass of wine. "Cheers!" Emily lifted her own glass in response, her eyes once again sparkling with life. "Cheers," she said, her voice carrying more than just a simple toast. It was a tribute to the moment, to the new chapter she was learning to embrace. Back in her room, Emily flopped onto the comfortable bed, sinking into the soft pillows. The luxury of the suite, the warm lighting, and the subtle scent of lavender enveloped her. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a sense of lightness she had never known before. "Wow, I never imagined living could feel this good," she murmured to herself. She thought about everything that had happened so far. The unforgettable dinner, meeting the chef she had admired for years, and now this charming stranger offering to teach her how to ski. Each moment felt like a small spark of joy, something that had once seemed impossible to reach. With a gentle smile, Emily nestled into the pillows. The excitement for the next day made her heart race, but the comfort of the room and her emotional exhaustion soon lulled her into a deep and peaceful sleep. For the first time in a long while, she fell asleep feeling truly happy. The next morning, Emily made her way down to the hotel lobby, dressed in warm, comfortable clothes with a scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. There, Ethan Parker was already waiting for her, his calm smile welcoming her. He wore a sleek ski jacket and looked ready for the adventure. "Ready for your first snow adventure?" he asked as she approached. "Ready? I'm not sure." Emily laughed, adjusting her scarf. "But I'm willing to give it a try. Let's just hope I don't break anything." The two walked together to the equipment rental station. Ethan helped her select a pair of boots, skis, and a helmet, patiently explaining small technical details. Emily listened intently, observing everything with curiosity, though her expression betrayed a mixture of excitement and apprehension, as if she were about to face a daunting challenge. When they reached the base of the mountain, surrounded by snow-covered trees and experienced skiers gliding effortlessly around them, Emily felt her nerves spike. At the same time, a thrill coursed through her. "Okay, here's the key," Ethan explained. "Relax and don't lock your legs. Trust the natural movement of your body." He demonstrated a smooth, fluid motion for her to mimic. Emily took a deep breath and tried to copy his movements. As soon as she began sliding forward, however, she lost her balance and fell sideways into the snow. "Oh no!" she exclaimed, then burst into laughter. "Okay, this is going to be harder than I thought." Ethan approached and extended a hand to help her up. "Don't worry, falling is part of the learning process. You'll get the hang of it." "I hope so, because gravity is definitely not on my side today," she joked, brushing the snow off her clothes. The lesson continued with countless attempts and falls. Emily was clumsy, often tripping over her own skis, but she never lost her cheerful attitude. Every tumble was followed by a genuine laugh. "Don't give up on me," she said with playful determination. "By the end of the day, I'll make it down this mountain without falling." Ethan chuckled, appreciating her light-hearted and resilient spirit. He found himself reflecting on how much this moment was affecting him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had so much fun. For years, his life had been an endless cycle of meetings, business deals, and responsibilities. But now, standing beside this vibrant woman, something felt different. Where has this woman been all my life, he thought? And why have I never been able to enjoy life the way she's doing now? After a few hours of practice, Ethan suggested they take a break. "How about some hot chocolate?" he asked, gesturing toward a cozy chalet on a small hilltop. "Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Let's go," Emily replied enthusiastically. They soon found themselves seated by a crackling fireplace inside the chalet, holding steaming mugs of hot chocolate. The sweet aroma filled the warm space, creating a comforting atmosphere. Emily smiled as she watched the flames dance in the hearth. "This is so nice. I never knew winter could feel this cozy," Emily said, her voice warm with contentment. Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "I can't remember the last time I had this much fun," he admitted. "My life revolves around my company. I'm always working, and even on trips like this, I can't fully relax. I spend more time on calls and in meetings than enjoying the moment." Emily felt a pang in her chest. She knew exactly what it was like to live that way, trapped by constant obligations. "I understand what you're saying," she replied. "A friend once told me something I've never forgotten. If we stop having fun, we get sick, and he was right. We need to take time to relax, to truly live." She paused, reflecting. Deep down, she was still wrestling with the reality of her diagnosis, the fear and uncertainty. Part of her wanted to scream, to ask God why all of this was happening. But instead, she chose to let herself relax. She smiled softly, determined not to let despair take over. Ethan nodded, taking in her words. "You're right. Maybe I needed to meet you to finally realize that." A comfortable silence settled between them for a few moments until Ethan suddenly asked, "Have you ever been in a helicopter?" Emily's eyes widened in surprise at the unexpected question. "No, never." "Perfect. Let's take a ride and see the mountains from above. What do you think?" She blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. Everything seemed to be happening in a way that felt almost magical. For the first time, life was smiling at her in a different way. "Yes, let's do it," she answered with excitement. Later, after the helicopter ride and a few more hours of practice, Emily finally managed to balance herself on the skis and glide down a small slope without falling. When she reached the bottom of the trail, she threw her arms into the air in celebration, as if she had just won a world championship. "I did it! I did it!" she exclaimed, laughing joyfully. Ethan clapped, genuinely impressed. "Congratulations! Looks like gravity finally gave up fighting you." "Finally!" she laughed, still exhilarated. "I told you I'd do it." Still euphoric, Emily invited Ethan to join her for dinner. "But I should warn you, I'm going to order everything on the menu again," she said with a playful grin. Ethan laughed. "You're unbelievable," he replied, shaking his head. As they walked back to the hotel, Ethan reflected on how different Emily was from the women he usually met. There was something pure and captivating about her. She didn't seem to care about his status and had no idea who he was or the fortune he possessed. To her, he was just Ethan, and that was refreshing, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. He felt that, with her, he might finally discover a new meaning to the life he had always thought he controlled. The next day, the rhythmic hum of the helicopter blades filled the air, but to Emily, the sound seemed distant. Her eyes were locked on the vast landscape before her. From above, the view of the mountains was absolutely mesmerizing. Snow-covered trees looked like tiny miniatures, and the sunlight reflected off the white terrain, creating a dazzling light show. She couldn't contain her excitement, the smile on her face radiating pure joy. Ethan, seated beside her, watched her reaction with admiration. He had taken this ride before, but it had never impacted him like this. Seeing the world through Emily's eyes made everything feel new and more beautiful. "Wow, this is surreal," she exclaimed, pressing her hands against the glass. She looked in every direction, absorbing every detail of the landscape. Suddenly, something caught her eye. A large adventure park within the hotel complex. She could see the treetop obstacle courses, a long zip line, and a bungee jumping area. Her eyes lit up, and she turned to Ethan excitedly, pointing down. "Are you up for it?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Ethan followed her gaze and smiled. "Only if we do it now," he replied with a playful challenge. Emily burst into a thrilled laugh, already feeling a surge of adrenaline just imagining the activities. As soon as the helicopter landed, they wasted no time and headed straight to the adventure park. The cold wind rushed against her face as Emily launched herself down the zip line. She screamed with exhilaration as the speed and the cutting air sent a surge of excitement through her. Her heart pounded wildly, but it was an incredible feeling, absolute freedom. Ethan followed right behind her, laughing as he watched her expression of awe and joy. Next, they tackled the treetop obstacle course, with Emily stumbling a few times on the suspended bridges but laughing at herself the entire time. Ethan helped her regain her balance, and the two of them enjoyed the challenge like children on an endless adventure. The highlight of the activities was the bungee jump. Emily stood at the top of the platform, staring down into the abyss below. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was no hesitation in her eyes. The instructor secured the harness, and she glanced at Ethan, who was right behind her. "I'm ready," she declared with determination. "Are you sure?" he teased. "Of course. Let's do this." With a countdown, Emily leapt into the void. The scream of exhilaration that escaped her lips was pure ecstasy. She felt the wind rushing against her entire body, her heart pounding wildly, and an electrifying energy surging through her veins. As the cord pulled her back and she swung gently in the air, she smiled, feeling more alive than ever. When she finally returned to the ground, Ethan wrapped her in a warm hug. "You're becoming a real adventure seeker, Emily," he said with admiration. "And I'm loving every second of it," she replied, laughing. At the end of the day, after a whirlwind of emotions, Ethan made an unexpected suggestion as they strolled through the resort together. "Emily, the hotel is hosting a gala tonight. Would you like to go with me?" She stopped in her tracks, surprised. "A gala? I've never been to one before." "Well, this is your chance. What do you say?" he asked, flashing her a kind smile. Emily thought for a moment and then nodded. "Sure, I'd love to." They exchanged a knowing smile, and she excused herself to get ready. Emily entered the hotel boutique with a bit of apprehension. The displays showcased stunning gowns, each one so elegant and sophisticated that she felt out of place. But the boutique attendants quickly greeted her with warmth and friendliness. "I need a dress for tonight's gala. Something special," she explained, her voice tinged with shyness. "Of course. Let's find the perfect dress for you, miss," one of the attendants said cheerfully. They brought out several options, and slowly Emily began to relax, enjoying herself as they suggested different styles. Eventually, she found the dress. A long gown in a deep shade of blue, adorned with delicate beadwork that shimmered softly under the light. The fabric flowed effortlessly, as though it had been made just for her. When Emily looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized her reflection. Her eyes sparkled with emotion. She looked like a princess. It was the most expensive dress she had ever bought, but she didn't care. She knew this moment was unique and perhaps the last time she would ever buy a dress like this. With her hair styled in soft waves and a delicate touch of makeup, Emily left the boutique feeling ready for the special night. "Tonight is my fairy tale," she whispered to herself, smiling. Ethan stood near the entrance of the grand ballroom, nervously adjusting the cuff of his jacket. He wasn't a man easily impressed, but since meeting Emily, he had felt a new kind of anticipation, as if every moment with her held something extraordinary. When he finally saw her approaching, he was momentarily speechless. She moved with natural elegance, the blue dress glistening softly under the chandelier lights. Her shy smile lit up her face, and Ethan found himself holding his breath before letting out a quiet sigh. "Wow, you look stunning," he murmured. Emily blushed at the compliment, feeling warmth rush to her cheeks. "Thank you," she replied softly, her smile genuine and radiant. He offered her his arm, and together they walked into the ballroom. The space was beautifully decorated with floral arrangements and candelabras on each table, while live musicians played a romantic melody. As they entered, all eyes turned to them. Discreet murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Who is she? I've never seen her here before." And him? Ethan Parker, always so reserved, now looks completely captivated. Emily, however, was oblivious to the attention. To her, this moment felt like a dream. Ethan guided her to the dance floor. As the music shifted to a slow waltz, he gently took her hand and placed his other hand on her waist. They moved together in perfect harmony, their eyes locked on one another. Emily felt weightless, as though the entire world had vanished around them. "You dance really well," Ethan remarked with a smile. "I haven't danced in years." "I barely remembered how," Emily admitted. "You're doing perfectly." The music continued, and for the two of them, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. Ethan had never felt so at ease with anyone before. Emily's authenticity was a rare treasure in his world of appearances and hidden agendas. After several dances and hours of conversation, Ethan guided her to a private balcony off the ballroom. The stars shone brilliantly in the clear night sky, and the cool mountain air enveloped them. Neither seemed bothered by the chill. Emily gazed out at the vastness of the mountains and sighed softly, crossing her arms over her chest. "Thank you. These past few days have been the best of my life." Ethan moved closer, his eyes warm and full of affection. "They've been the best of mine too." He paused, searching for the right words. "You've taught me some important lessons, Emily. I've never felt this good around anyone before. You're special. You have a light. Your presence brightens any room." It's enchanting. Emily was caught off guard by the depth of his words. Before she could respond, he stepped even closer, closing the distance between them. Gently, Ethan cupped her face in his hands and pulled her in for a kiss. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment. The kiss was deep and filled with emotion, unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. The world around them vanished. It was just the two of them, lost in that instant of connection. But then, like a wave of cold reality, the cruel truth of her diagnosis crashed back into her mind. Emily's eyes flew open, and she quickly pulled away, breathing heavily. "No, you can't. I'm sorry." "Emily, what's wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice full of concern and confusion. She couldn't answer. Tears streamed down her face as she turned and hurried away from the balcony. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then followed after her. Emily rushed through the ballroom and across the hotel lobby, ignoring the curious stares of onlookers. Outside, the biting cold of the night enveloped her, but she didn't care. She stopped in the middle of the garden and looked up at the star-filled sky, her heart racing and her mind in turmoil. "Why, God? Why?" Emily shouted, her voice filled with pain and confusion. "What is happening here? Why is this happening to me?" Ethan, who had just reached the garden, heard her cry. He saw how hurt and vulnerable she was. Without saying a word, he took off his coat and gently placed it over her shoulders. Emily shivered slightly at the warmth of the fabric and looked at him, tears still streaming down her face. "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" he asked softly. She hesitated, but deep down, she knew she couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. The pain needed to be released. "I'm going to die, Ethan. I only have a few months left," she confessed. His expression grew serious, but he didn't interrupt. He let her continue. "I came here because I've never truly lived. I worked day and night, saved every penny for a future that now won't exist. I decided to enjoy life, but I didn't expect something like this to happen. I can't drag you into this. It wouldn't be fair." Ethan felt the weight of her words, but instead of pulling away, he stepped closer. With tenderness, he wrapped his arms around her. Emily cried silently against his chest as he gently stroked her hair in comfort. "You didn't drag me into this, Emily. I'm here because I chose to be. I was the one who approached you," he said softly. He lifted her face gently and wiped away her tears with his thumb. "If you're here to live your life to the fullest, then let's do that together. You don't have to face this alone. Tell me, what do you want to accomplish? What dreams do you still have?" Emily gazed at him, her eyes shining with a mix of surprise and gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt she didn't have to carry all the weight by herself. Life was offering her not only the chance to live, but also the opportunity to share this journey with someone else. She turned her gaze to the brightly lit casino next to the hotel. The place was dazzling, with colorful lights and the lively sounds of slot machines filling the air. To Emily, it was a mesmerizing new experience. She looked around wide-eyed, like a child marveling at a theme park. "I've never been to a casino before," she said with a smile. Ethan leaned in slightly, a playful sparkle in his eyes. "Say no more. We're going right now. The night is ours, and it's waiting for us." They stepped into the grand hall, where chandeliers sparkled like stars. Emily felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never gambled before and had no idea where to start. Sensing her hesitation, Ethan suggested a few simple games to ease her in. "No pressure, okay? Just enjoy yourself," he reassured her. Emily nodded and they began playing. They laughed at every small win and loss, as if they were carefree friends simply having fun. Time seemed to fly as they explored the casino, trying their luck at roulette tables and slot machines. However, luck didn't appear to be on their side that night. After a few hours, as they were thinking about leaving, Emily decided to use her last chips on an electronic poker machine. She sat down with a playful sigh. "Just to end the night with a bit of flair," she said. Ethan watched closely, amused by her nonchalant attitude. She pressed the buttons on the machine, not expecting anything. But suddenly, the lights began flashing wildly. The sound of victory sirens blared, filling the hall and drawing the attention of nearby players. "Congratulations! You hit the jackpot," the casino attendant announced, visibly impressed. Emily blinked, stunned. "What? I won? How much is it?" $1.5 million. For a few moments, the world seemed to freeze. Ethan and Emily exchanged disbelieving glances. Then, as if snapped out of their shock, they both burst into laughter, a light, joyful sound that echoed through the room. "You're a lucky woman, Emily," Ethan said, shaking his head, still laughing. Emily shrugged with a smile that showed she was still struggling to believe what had just happened. "I wish I were that lucky all the time." The casino staff quickly organized the paperwork to transfer the prize to her account. Emily signed the documents, still in a daze. As they stepped outside, the fresh air of the early morning surrounded them. Ethan, his curiosity piqued, glanced at her and asked, "So, what's next? What's the next dream you want to make come true?" Emily pondered for a moment, her gaze fixed on the stars above. Then, with a soft, almost shy sigh, she responded, "Actually, my biggest dream was to get married. The rest of my wishes, I've already fulfilled them here. Skiing, dancing at a gala, bungee jumping, You've already done more for me than I ever deserved. Thank you for everything, Ethan." He stopped in his tracks and looked at her intently for a few seconds. Then, a mischievous smile spread across his face. "How about we do something crazy?" he suddenly suggested. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of crazy?" "Let's get married. There's a chapel nearby. No one has to know. It's your dream, right? Let's make it happen right now." Emily's jaw dropped. Where did he come up with these ideas? For a moment, she thought he was joking, but his gaze was both serious and affectionate. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, uncertain. Ethan took a step closer and gently held her hands. "I am. Are you?" She stood silent for a few moments, her heart racing. Life was offering her something she had never imagined possible. Then, with a shy, enchanted smile, she nodded. "Let's do it." The chapel was small and charming, with colorful stained glass windows and a warm, intimate atmosphere. It felt like something out of an improvised fairy tale. They were greeted by a friendly officiant who quickly arranged the ceremony. Emily was still wearing her elegant blue gown, and Ethan looked impeccable in his dark suit. There were no witnesses except for the celebrant, but that didn't matter. As they exchanged their impromptu vows, Emily's eyes filled with tears of joy this time. "I never thought something like this would ever happen to me," she murmured as they slipped on simple, makeshift rings. Ethan smiled warmly. "We're living the moment." When the officiant pronounced them officially married, they laughed like two friends who had just pulled off a delightful prank. As they returned to the hotel, Ethan gently offered, "Do you want to stay in my room tonight? We could have another drink and talk. The day is already starting again, and we only have a few hours left to sleep." Still floating on the euphoria of the moment, Emily nodded. "Sure, let's go." In the room, they settled on the balcony, enjoying the view of the mountains as a gentle breeze whispered around them. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Emily sighed softly, feeling completely safe in his embrace. "I can't believe we've done so much in such a short time. Feels like a dream." "It's not," Ethan replied, planting a soft kiss on the top of her head. "It's the life you've always deserved." She closed her eyes, relaxing in his arms. Everything felt perfect, except for the lingering shadow of her diagnosis in the back of her mind. But for the first time, Emily was determined to live in the present without letting fear steal it from her. Ethan took a deep breath and, in a soft, slightly husky voice, asked, "May I kiss my wife now?" Emily's heart raced. The sound of that word, wife, left her momentarily speechless. A mix of emotion and nervous excitement surged through her body. She didn't need to say anything else. She simply nodded, agreeing in silence. Ethan smiled, a gentle, tender smile. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to adjust to the closeness. His hands slid to her waist as Emily rested her hands on his chest, feeling the steady, yet rapid, rhythm of his heartbeat. When their lips finally met, the world around them seemed to fade away. They moved toward the bed, their touch becoming more intimate as every barrier between them dissolved. Emily felt a wave of powerful sensations, unlike anything she had ever experienced. In that room, at that moment, she wasn't a woman marked by a cruel diagnosis. She was simply Emily, alive, cherished, and desired. The rest of the night was a blend of tenderness and passion. There was no pressure, just the mutual need to connect deeply. They surrendered themselves completely to each other, sharing a beautiful night of love. Wrapped in the serenity of the moment, they eventually drifted off to sleep, enveloped in each other's presence. At dawn, Ethan sat in a chair near the bed, his arms resting on his knees and his gaze calm as he watched Emily. The breakfast tray was already on the table, croissants, fresh fruit, orange juice, and steaming coffee, but he barely noticed the food. His eyes were fixed on her, on the way she slept peacefully, her lips slightly parted, her face relaxed. The soft, golden morning light illuminated the delicate contours of Emily's face. Ethan felt a pang in his chest. He had never met anyone like her. In such a short time, with little effort, she had turned the past few days into the best of his life. But then the painful thought resurfaced. She doesn't have much time. He turned his gaze toward the sky visible through the window, taking a deep breath as his mind raced. "Why?" he murmured quietly. "Why now? Why her?" Ethan pressed his lips together, as if suppressing the question could somehow ease the helplessness he felt. All he wanted was more time. Time to learn every detail about her, to share more moments and dreams. The thought of losing Emily was almost unbearable. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of her stirring. When he looked back, she was waking up. Her sleepy eyes met his, and she gave him a gentle smile. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still drowsy. He stood and walked over to her, sitting on the edge of the bed. With tenderness, he kissed her forehead. "Good morning, wife. Did you sleep well?" She let out a contented sigh, stretching lazily beneath the sheets. "It was the best night of my life." His smile widened, but a subtle melancholy lingered in his eyes. Emily noticed and furrowed her brow slightly. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" she asked with concern. Ethan hesitated for a moment but chose not to burden her with his fears. Instead, he gently took a strand of her hair between his fingers and replied, "Yes, everything's perfect. I was just thinking about how lucky I am to have you here." Emily's heart warmed at Ethan's words. She observed him for a moment, reflecting on how much he had made the past few days special for her. The pastor's words echoed in her mind. "Think about what you've always wanted to do and do it. Savor every second." She took a deep breath, allowing the happiness of the moment to wash over her. For the first time in so long, she didn't feel trapped by fear. For the first time, she could face the future, whether it was long or short, with gratitude. "If I die now," she thought, "I can say with absolute certainty that I made the most of the last days of my life." After a peaceful breakfast, Emily invited Ethan to explore the hiking trails around the resort. He agreed enthusiastically, and she went up to her room to grab her phone. Dressed comfortably in hiking clothes, she returned to meet him with a light smile on her face. They were ready to enjoy another day together. However, as soon as they stepped out through the hotel's main entrance, they noticed unusual commotion. Guests and staff had gathered in the garden, their gazes fixed on the roof of the building. Tense murmurs rippled through the crowd. "What's going on?" Emily asked, approaching a guest who appeared anxious. "There's a man up there. He says he's going to jump. He lost everything, he's broke. He says life has no meaning for him anymore." Emily felt a shock course through her body. For a moment, she stood frozen, trying to process what she had just heard. Then, a surge of anger and disbelief rose within her. Someone who had their health and the chance to keep living was about to throw it all away while she was grappling with the fear of having so little time left. "No, this isn't right. I can't accept this," she muttered under her breath. She turned to Ethan, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm going up there to talk to him." "Emily, wait. It's dangerous," Ethan began, but she was already running toward the hotel entrance, leaving him behind, worried. She climbed the stairs as quickly as she could, her heart pounding, not from physical exertion, but from the emotional urgency driving her forward. When she reached the top of the building, she found the man sitting on the edge, his legs dangling precariously over the side. He stared into the distance, his gaze vacant and lost. Emily approached cautiously, keeping her voice gentle. "Please, you need to rethink this. Don't do it." The man slowly turned his head to look at her, his eyes filled with distrust. "And who are you to tell me something like that? You don't know what I've lost. I lost everything. I'm broke. I have nothing left." Emily took a deep breath and sat down near him, maintaining a safe distance. "I'm someone who knows what it's like to lose everything, including time. I was given a diagnosis. I only have a few months to live. Every day is a battle against fear. You're here because you lost money, but you still have something I would give anything to have: time." The man blinked, startled. He seemed to be trying to process her words. I don't know what to say. "Look, you went bankrupt? That's good. It means you took risks and tried. Losing $5 million? That's something only someone capable and determined could do. If you achieve that once, you can do it again. Life is full of ups and downs, but you can't recover a life that's lost. Time, the love of your family, those things are priceless. Please don't make me witness something like this. You can get through this." The man's breathing grew heavier, and silent tears began streaming down his face. He felt foolish for almost throwing away the one thing that truly mattered. Emily's words, spoken with raw truth and emotion, hit him hard. He couldn't deny the reality any longer. Emily gently took his arm. "Come with me. Let's go back. You don't have to do this." The man nodded, still crying, and allowed her to help him stand. They walked together toward the terrace entrance. Just then, Emily's phone began vibrating in her pocket. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was a call from the hospital. She took a deep breath, feeling a wave of apprehension. "It's from the hospital. They're probably calling to tell me it's time to start treatment," she said, looking at the man she had just helped. He quickly wiped his face and gave her a grateful smile. "Good luck with that. I hope everything goes well. And if you ever need anything, I'm here. You saved my life today." Emily nodded, offering him a gentle smile in return. She answered the phone and, still unsure of what awaited her, walked toward Ethan, ready to face the next chapter of her journey. Emily brought the phone to her ear, her hands trembling with nervousness. Her breathing was uneven as she tried to brace herself for whatever the doctor had to say. On the other end, the doctor's voice, though serious, carried a gentle tone that reassured her slightly. "Emily, are you okay? We've been trying to reach you several times, but your phone was out of range." She took a deep breath and responded, trying to sound composed. "Yes, doctor. I'm fine. The signal might have been weak on the lower floors of the hotel. Up here on the rooftop, it's better. What's going on?" There was a brief pause before the doctor continued, and Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. "Emily, I need to apologize. You're not sick. There was a malfunction with one of our hospital's machines." Emily froze. What do you mean?" "We conducted an investigation after noticing that 3 other patients also received incorrect diagnoses in quick succession. We discovered that the equipment used for your tests was faulty. Your results were wrong. You're healthy, Emily. You'll live for many years. Please be at ease. When you return, we'd like you to come in and speak with us so we can formally apologize and take full responsibility for any pain or distress we caused you." An overwhelming rush of emotions surged through Emily, forcing her to lean on the terrace railing for support. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or fear. "Wow, doctor. This is incredible. I can't thank you enough for this news. So much has changed in my life over the past few days, and this just completes everything. Thank you so much for calling. It's the least we could do. Take care of yourself, Emily. We'll be here when you're ready to return." Emily ended the call, still in shock but smiling through her tears. Beside her, the man who had nearly ended his own life stood quietly, having overheard the conversation. He noticed the profound relief on her face and couldn't help but share in her joy. "That's amazing. A happy ending for both of us," he said with genuine enthusiasm. Emily nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes with the back of her hand. "Yes. It's a better ending than I ever could have imagined. Let's celebrate." Emily and the man took the elevator down together. When they reached the lobby, they were greeted by a crowd of guests and staff who, relieved that the crisis had ended peacefully, were gathered with hopeful smiles. Among them, Ethan stood anxiously waiting. The moment Emily spotted him, She ran toward him and threw herself into his arms. "Ethan, I have the most incredible news," she exclaimed, her voice still trembling with emotion. He held her tightly, gently stroking her hair. "What happened, Emily? Are you okay?" She lifted her face to meet his eyes, her expression radiant. "I'm not sick. It was a mistake. I'm going to live." For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, processing her words. Then, a wide smile spread across his face, and he pulled her in for a passionate kiss. A kiss filled with pure joy and overwhelming relief. It was as though all the tension in the world had melted away. The crowd, though unaware of the full context, began clapping once again, celebrating the magical moment between the couple. "Life has given us a new opportunity, Ethan. Now I truly understand what it means to live." Ethan smiled, deeply moved, "And we'll live it to the fullest. Together, always." In the days that followed, Emily and Ethan made the most of their remaining time at the resort. They explored, sought new adventures, and shared dreams for the future. When their stay finally came to an end, they left with a renewed perspective on life. Back in their routines, they were determined to continue pursuing the dreams that had once seemed out of reach. They traveled to places they had always wanted to visit, set new goals, and cherished every moment together. Ethan met Emily's family, who welcomed him warmly, deeply touched by the happiness that now radiated from her. Likewise, Emily was introduced to Ethan's family, who were captivated by the simplicity and light she brought into his life. A few months later, they organized a beautiful wedding ceremony, this time surrounded by all the people they loved. Emily's dress shimmered under the daylight, and the vows they exchanged were rich with meaning and emotion. Emily had learned the most valuable lesson of her life. It wasn't enough to merely exist. She needed to truly live, to savor the moments, to have fun, to love, and to be grateful for the opportunities life offered. Ethan, in turn, felt thankful every day for meeting the woman who had transformed his view of the world. Together, they built a life full of adventure, joy, and love. And so, they lived happily, savoring each day as the precious gift it was. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to subscribe. A big hug, and see you in the next video.